Boston Civic Design Commission. Meeting is now called to order. My name is Mimi Love. I'm a co-chair of the commission. I'd like to thank the commissioners for donating their time, sharing their valuable insights, and shaping the city of Boston into a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable city for all of its citizens. We are pleased to have this meeting in a hybrid format with commissioners in the room and attending virtually. We ask for your patience as we continue to manage technical issues that arise while we adjust to this format. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public this meeting is being recorded. Please note that the audio recording of this meeting will be available from the commission staff. Commissioners present, I'm going to call your name and please say present. Linda Eastley.
Present.
Diana Fernandez. He will be joining us later. Jonathan Garland.
Present.
Donna Gillis-Smith.
Present.
David Hafseen.
Present.
Nikki Young Kim. I believe she will be joining us as well. Kathy Cotaritas. Anne-Marie Lubenow.
Present.
Thank you. David Manfredi.
Present.
Catherine Morris. Wait for her to join us. David Nagahiro. Laura Solano.
Present.
Kirk Sykes.
Present.
And myself, Mimi Love, present. Excellent. We do have a few announcements before we get started. The report from Planning Department will be presented after the project recommendations. It will be a wrap-up of 2025 presented by Christina Bishop, so please stay after the meeting just so that we celebrate all of those milestones. Also, following, there will be some changes to the commission that Diana Fernandez will be sharing, so that will also be worth hanging on to the end of this meeting if time allows. Lastly, a reminder that starting January 1st of 2026, public testimony will be limited to the introduction of projects. We don't have any projects being introduced today, so that will not be part of the agenda. And moving on to meeting minutes, I see that Commissioner Kim has joined us in person. Welcome. Do I have a motion to approve the following meeting minutes? The November 5th monthly meeting, the December 2nd monthly meeting, and the December 16th subcommittee meeting.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Excellent. I'm going to call each of you and please say yay or nay. Linda Eastley,
Yay.
Jonathan Garland,
Yay.
Donna Gillis-Smith, Donna, we're voting on meeting minutes.
Sorry, you didn't hear me? Yay.
Okay, sorry about that. David Hafseen,
Yay.
Nick Young Kim, yay. Abby Cotaritas, not sure she's with us. Anne-Marie Lubenow,
Yay.
David Manfredi,
Yay.
Catherine Morris.
Just joined us.
Catherine, I may call on you in a minute. We're voting on meeting minutes, approving November 5th, December 2nd, and December 16th subcommittee meeting. David Nagahiro, Laura Solano,
Yay.
Kirk Sykes,
Yay.
myself, Mimi Love, yay. So, Catherine, welcome. I'm not sure if you want to approve the meeting minutes, but we do have consensus on that approval.
Yeah, yes, I've read them already, yes.
Thank you. All right. So moving on to presentations for review. Our first project is 275-279 Center Street in Jamaica Plain, referred to as the Mildred Hailey Phase 4. For those who didn't see that, Tyra Shen, the director, just walked in and said, wishes all a happy new year. Those on the call as well. Thank you for your services. All right, the Mildred Hailey Phase 4. This will be the third presentation of Phase 4 presented to the Commission. It was introduced on November 5th, and it had a subsequent design subcommittee meeting on December 16th. At the 16th subcommittee meeting, the commissioners in attendance were Easley, Garland, Hasteen, Kim, Manfredi, Morris, and Nagahiro. So we would look to your comments first. Shauna Gillis-Smith is recused from this, and the planning department that has been managing this project includes Megan Richard and Marco Sanchez, who are here with us in the room. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the proponents.
Excuse me, Mimi, I was also part of that. I didn't hear my name.
Yes, I do remember that from the video. Apologies. Thank you for letting us know.
And I just sent a request to be able to share. The link I provided did not give me access.
You should have it now. I don't know if you need to take down the share.
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. My name is Emmeline Gojak from PCA, and Robert online from JPMC is going to take a
Robert, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks for that introduction, and good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. My name is Robert Smith-Mendez. I'm the Development Project Manager here at the Community Builders, the developer for this project. I'd like to briefly introduce the team presenting this evening. We're joined by Mark Eclipse and Emmeline Gojak from PCA, our architects, and Amy Linsenmeyer, our landscape architect from Ground Inc. We're really excited to share updates on the Mildred Hailey Phase 4 design that reflect feedback that we received at previous BCDC meetings and how that design has evolved over time. With that, I'll turn it over to PCA and Ground to walk you through the design updates.
Great, thank you, Robert. Just as a reminder that we focused our changes over 4 areas you remember from the last meeting. Lamartine open space, which you'll see revised to be much more playful and naturalistic, and community-oriented spaces. The space between 4A and 4B, we studied the stormwater treatment and just how the building looks itself as well, and how the program can change. The interim condition at 4A, because we wanted to study how the building might look before 4B is completely built, and then taking control of what we can, because we are not responsible for the demolition. The BHA is responsible for that. So we studied what we could. And then the building design, various comments between 4A and 4B, which we will get into, but I'm going to pass it off to Amy from Ground.
Thanks. Nice to see everybody in person. This is my first in-person meeting for a while, so very exciting. And thank you, everybody, for your really productive comments and your time. I think that all of the feedback that we've gotten throughout this process has really improved the project overall. So thank you for that. Just to take us back through the different iterations of the landscape site plan. On the left-hand side, we have from 2023 what was approved by BCDC in terms of the master plan. In the middle is what we presented back in November, and then on the right-hand side is our most recent site plan. Let me see. Help me out here.
If you just click to your left side, and then it should be able to.
All right. So here we have our most recent site plan that incorporates some of the comments and feedback that we got subcommittee meeting as well. Walk you through some of the broader brush strokes. We really focused on the space in the middle and making the parking courtyard both more ecologically friendly and also a place that could be transformed into a community space. At number 1 on the United Way Plaza, we focused we explored a little bit how we might be able to create different social spaces in that area. We expanded the size of the lawn. We were able to incorporate at number 6 a splash pad, which was a strong request that we heard from the community. And then we also incorporated Commissioner Kim's comments about trying to adopt a more playful approach to the park overall. And then we really focused on creating accessibility through seating throughout the project. So here we have a view of the United Way Plaza. We have building 2 on the left-hand side and building 4A on the right-hand side. Variety of smaller social spaces here. In terms of the planting, we're focusing on a native perennial palette at the ground cover level, and then we have Mrs. Sylvatica and some flowering dogwoods in the background. This is a view of the splash pad that's familiar to some of you, but maybe not to the full committee in its entirety. We have incorporated more naturalistic seating through boulders, and then also some more rectilinear stone components in reclaimed granite and with accessible seating with backs and armrests incorporated into the stone. Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag here. Here's just another bird's eye view of the splash pad, again highlighting the variability in the seating. At the last meeting, the subcommittee meeting, we heard the desire to have the older components possibly carried throughout the extent of La Martine Plaza. So here we have some incorporated, and we've removed the precast seats and incorporated the more orthogonal stone components with the wood top. Here is a view of the interior parking courtyard with the rain garden, green infrastructure. We heard a comment at the subcommittee meeting to try to darken the palette of the permeable paving in the center a little bit. So that was something that we've incorporated. And here's that same view with it activated as a community space. And you can see there's also pedestrian cut-throughs across the rain garden areas. Moving on to the temporary condition after 4A is constructed, but before 4E is built, we have a temporary plaza that is really at a concept level stage, but here's just some of the ideas that we thought could work at this area, some, playful color asphalt and temporary planters. And then a view further up Center Street of what the landscape itself might look like, where 4B will be eventually, but how we might incorporate maintaining some of the existing trees, and then some sort of concealing enclosure for the parking of 4A. And then lastly, we just have an open space materials palette that highlights some of the primary components that we're going to be incorporating throughout the landscape.
Thank you, Amy. And then moving on to some of the architectural changes, this is 4A. We, as you can see, reduced the contrast of the previous 2 iterations that you see at the top on the PNS and then to what was showed at the last meeting, creating this fade articulation, but in a really subtle way, increasing the top cornice of both the brick and of the metal panel that wraps the entirety of the building, and keeping this very prominent attraction to the residential entry. And this brick wraps around the entirety of the first floor, which also ties into B. This is the entrance of B. You can kind of see it here, but I'll show you better in the elevations. The brick is what we studied with subcommittee to try and let it follow the grade, because as it approached the La Martine Plaza, it was getting out of scale. So this is still originally what it was at this corner, but then as it reaches La Martine Plaza, it steps down 3 times, and the approach at La Martine just feels a lot more to scale. That was due to the subcommittee's input and your input last time. And then we also studied the proportions and scaled the awnings to be more pedestrian scale, and but also protect from the elements. And we still wanted this entry to feel very grand. It is a nice new park for Jamaica Plains entry. You can see those kind of different higher scale bricks on the above images. These are the additional courtyard elevations that we added to show you how we're wrapping that articulation all the way around. We really didn't want to change the way the building looked all the way around as it went to the courtyard, as this is going to be the front approach to the building that you'll see from Center Street for, you know, years to come before 4B is built, and that you can see as well the nice brick, those wrap the corners as well there. And then this is just showing you how you can see the brick relationships from the two buildings here, and then 4A and 4B has that very similar approach to the metal articulation that's very subtle in 4A now, but they still feel like they're part of the same family. And then this last one is the one I wanted to take a second look at, is it has, you can see better the stepping with the 8-foot grade change we have. So that was one of the biggest changes there. And then in addition to that, I wanted to show how we're going to try throughout coordination to keep as much of the mechanical, larger elements in the center of the building, and continue to study the effects and making sure that remains hidden. But we do feel that we'll be able to keep them mostly hidden from the immediate context view. And then we added this as well from the last BCCC subcommittee request to show how we're using metal panel in a very, you know, we're keeping the colors very close together, but adjusting the exposure and articulation, so as you approach the building, you can see more quality and detail, but as you're far away, it doesn't, you know, feel so fussy.
All right, for those who are not in the room, I just want to note that Diana Fernandez, the Deputy Chief of Urban Design, has joined us, as well as Kathy Coteritas, fellow commissioner. So with that, I will hand over to commissioners who were last in the subcommittee. If anyone wants to raise your digital hand on the Zoom, I have access to my laptop, so I think I can see you. For those in the room?
I think I was at the last subcommittee meeting, so maybe I'll kick it off. I think that you guys have done a lot of work in response to the comments we've made, so really appreciate it. I love that we're talking. Just kidding. But I think this is going to be a really handsome transformation of this neighborhood. And one thing that I noticed from your presentation was, I think usually when we say playful, we think like lots of color and stuff, but it has a beautiful like biophilic quality of playfulness that I really appreciate. So I just want to say how much I've appreciated working with your team, and I think you guys have done a great job. I think there's all these different facets, and there's like a little bit of something for everyone in this landscape, which I think is really appropriate for this kind of residential use. So, thank you.
I would only add to that, because I was not in an in-between meeting, but given that what I've seen between the first and this,
Right.
that all of the questions that I think we've had about what the interim qualities between phases of development seem to really have been addressed, and in some newly creative ways. So, and knowing that you still don't know all the details of that, just simply being able to manage that, the in-between time is something that I think we were concerned about at the get-go, and I think you've sort of quelled those concerns.
I'll go and I'll want to congratulate you as well. I think the work that we're seeing is a reflection of just the sheer improvements that you've made, and it's very craftful. I think both landscape and building, it's come a long way, and you can see the refinements and also through the simplicity. I like the temporary interim condition and the improvements there that you showed. One question I had is, and you don't have to answer this now, but I just wonder if the grading there will allow for temporary pop-up events, along the street edge just before 4B comes online. Is that sort of like a universal grade slope, and can that have that type of seasonal use? But I think the open lawn certainly provides some further thought of future activation. I think the colors that you show on the building work really well, because you found a way to use a small palette of materials, but looking at texture and scale, you know, to like when you showed the corrugated metal, and you can appreciate it as you get closer to the building. I think it has a nice 500-foot test, meaning you can stand 500 feet away or you can stand 10 feet away, and you learn about the building as you get closer or farther. I really like the image on slide 16, if you can flip to it, because that was one of my earlier concerns about how does the building really ground itself and speak to the other buildings along Center Street, like the podium relationship to the building on the left, and the, you know, obviously the one here in the foreground to the right. And it just feels like this is going to McYoung's point, fit in and root into what the neighborhood already has going. Like, this feels like it's another complement to the neighborhood. And lastly, I'll just say something that I didn't see in an update, but you started with, which is how you found a way to balance the commitment, and that's really to the developer, the commitment to the parking when you talk to the community and the BHA and needing to preserve a particular parking count, but through landscape, I found a way to weave in trees and think about the pop-up events of that asphalt, and that can have multiple lives. And so that's a tough urban condition where you have to face the honesty of open space, parking, and activation, and the realism. And I think you've done a good job balancing that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass it to Anne Marie. Anne Marie, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm just operating one-handed tonight, so I'm a little slower than usual. I think this is the first time I've seen this project, but I did have an opportunity to go back and review prior presentations and comments. And I just wanted to really compliment you on the work that you did to look at different facade alternatives for building 4B. I too really appreciate the way it meets Center Avenue. And I think the decision, I know you were looking at different iterations of how you treat, you're responding to BPD staff comments about base, middle, and top. And I think the final design really does a great job of both meeting the kind of the formality of the, you know, a major street on Center Avenue, and then stepping down to be more consistent with the base of the other buildings within the development. So I think that works really well in a case where we have, you know, different buildings happening at different times with different designers. I also appreciate the texture of the facade on building 4A. I think that is a really nice way of bringing some visual interest and texture to a contemporary building using contemporary materials. So thank you for all the work you've done to respond to the Commission's comments.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Kirkside?
Yep, great. Yeah, I want to congratulate you. I think you've done a very nice job of incorporating many of our comments. I only had two that I'd love you to think about as you're going forward. It is just thinking about how much that departure in chroma made a difference in the perception of the whole development as you introduce the lighter colored buildings. And ironically, when you've had 50, 60 years of brick asphalt and a little bit of concrete, just incorporating other colors and textures goes a long way to change the whole perception of the complex. And I think in this case, that was proven out when we did the Stop and Shop and the Martha Elliott Health Center. Just to bring in metal and lighter colors made a big difference right next to a lot of brick. So I would encourage you to keep going with that. And then the only other comment is the use of lighting. I think it's amazing when all you've had is the same type of pedestal light for a long time. If you can start to integrate lighting into the buildings, and especially on the perimeter proximate to public realm, I think that also might go a long way to changing the perception of the place. But you've done a lot, and you know, it's my neighborhood, so I'm taking this one a little personal, but I also think you're going to do a tremendous amount to improve the whole perception of this development and of the surrounding communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. Laura Solano?
Thanks for your presentation, and I think the compliments sort of speak to how responsive you've been with the commissioners, and we appreciate that. And relative to the landscape, I was thinking as I was looking at this earlier that, in terms of the sort of partie of the landscape, it really hasn't had to change too much. And so the dials that you've turned in response to our comments have been, I think, really pretty successful. I would encourage you to look at different forms of stone, primarily for human comfort. I think that Mick Young and I had a conversation last time about the ability to use more rough stone and more mannered stone, which is what we're looking at here. And I think pushing that a little bit further. The only dial that I feel wasn't turned as much as it could be is in the temporary condition. If you could go to that perspective of the grass, there you go. I still think that there could be something that sort of backdrops the plaza, whether it's topography or plants, and it doesn't have to be in a row. I think that it could be just something that maybe ties the spaces together a little bit and holds that space while it's waiting for that building to be built. I can't remember who it was that said, is there a way to sort of make the lawn feel like it's more at, I think, the street level? And I think there's another opportunity to play with topography. And I think that, moving topography around is a relatively simple gesture to kind of help form that shape, and give a hint of what's to come, because we don't know the schedule of that long term. I think that wraps up my comments, and I just congratulate you on how great this has moved along.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. Linda Eastley?
Thanks, Mimi. It's really great to see you all there in person. You're compressed into such a tiny shape, but great to see you. I'll piggyback first on Laura's comment, since I had a similar one. And that is that I do feel like that phase one still feels a little bit like leftover space. And I think there are some opportunities, and I know that you'll get there working with planning staff. There are some opportunities to make it feel more intentional, since we don't really know when phase two is going to be built. So I would just put that, kind of put a pin in that and encourage you to continue thinking through that. My other larger comment is really about the great urban design moves that you have put forward in this project. I think, those of us who have been part of subcommittees for a little while on this project, and even, as we were looking at the original master plan, might forget that, this form used to look really different. And the idea that you've broken it into two pieces, you've tried really hard to create this courtyard space in between. This is a great diagram. Create this courtyard space that was meaningful in between is really terrific. And it took time and thought, and I think that it's going to create such a better project. So I wanted to say thank you for that. I also think the other really clever thing that you've done is to pay such close attention to the base of the building. And maybe we can go, I think, slide 17. This is, yes, so slide 17. So I know we spent a lot of time in the last subcommittee talking about the fact that it's not easy to solve a building that's stepping down through grade, and what do you do with awnings and what do you do with that base? And I really think it ended up in a great place. I think that in terms of public realm, it feels meaningful, it feels intentional, the scale feels right. And so thank you for continuing to work through that. And I love the other commissioner comments as well about open space, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this project built. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. David Hustine?
Well, I'm not going to repeat all the wonderful comments that people have made. I just want to really thank the proponents for a really healthy process. I think that some of the things that have been pointed out, the treatment of the metal panel, the stepping down of the storefronts on the building, the simplification of the materials. You know, sometimes we hear conversations about things being playful, and playful means sometimes unresolved. And actually here, I think that you have gone to great lengths to really thoughtfully organize the facades, the patterning, the French balconies, and how they relate to the stepping down, for example, of the storefronts. And I feel like this project is really going to elevate this entire district, the neighborhood architecturally. There are quite a few buildings around it that are not as thoughtfully put together as this one, and I think this is really going to create a very strong sense of place and a strong anchor. The two things that one comment that Kirk mentioned, which is the idea of actually maybe some pretty visible like light posts or lighting down that green passage, I think could be really nice, to make it really feel like a public way, as opposed to the lighting, let's say, being just very subtle. I think like actually light posts going down there could signal a sense of publicness and openness that might be welcome. I also really love the patterning that you did with the parking spaces in the middle of the courtyard, and I wonder if those could even be amped up a little bit more, with when you get into designing that and thinking about, you know, the color choices that are available in those pavers. That's a really clever detail, and I've always been concerned about what people look at and what they see when they look down into this courtyard, because it is a parking court. And I think that between the green spaces and the sense of patterning, I think that's really exciting. I think you could even push it just a little bit more, and it might be an exciting almost art piece, that the whole maybe even an artist is involved in how the paving is designed, and it becomes something participatory in a way that's really exciting. We always think of art being vertical, but I think this is something that actually a lot of people are going to be looking down on. I'll leave it there. I think the project looks really great, and I look forward to it moving along.
Can I ask a question? Are these pavers or are they painted?
Okay, pavers.
Permeable?
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thanks, David. I'm going to pass on to David Manfredi.
Thank you, Mimi. I'm not going to belabor a lot of good comments from my colleagues. I just want to say this. I applaud your restraint. I think as we've seen this project go through the process, you really focused on proportions, the proportions of the blocks of buildings themselves, the proportions of the openings. That everyone has mentioned the relationship to street and the relationship to the topography. This is, I think, a wonderful view. And if I had one comment, and it's a very minor one, in the other building, these proportions of opening into wall are really quite wonderful, and then a segment of wall to overall wall, also quite wonderful. And if I could do one thing, I'd make those the other building, the openings more vertical. No, actually, I'm mixing myself up, but go around to keep going. I keep I've mixed up my buildings, but the building beyond if you, I don't know if it's dropping the sill just a little bit, if it's whatever it is, but that yes, to get a little bit further off the square proportion, and so that it mimics the proportion of your change in materials and your slight setback and your Juliet balconies. But I think you've made some subtle moves that are people have said it in different ways, that they don't rely on loud color or you 5 different material choices. There's a really nice quietness, really well handled. So thank you.
Thank you, David. All right, I see your hand up. You have a follow-up comment?
I did very quickly. I'm sorry. I didn't look at my list before I ended. I just had a clarification question, which was about the native perennials. Is that what I heard is in the plazas, top and bottom?
Yes.
I would just caution you to think about making sure that in those perennials, which I guess that there is some evergreen, because it's just such a long winter here, and I think beds with mulch in them can be a little disheartening. So minor comment, but just something to think about for the future.
True. Great.
All right, I think those are the commissioner comments. I'm going to add a couple of comments. I have seen this as the introductory, and I was not at the last subcommittee, so I do have just a couple of comments, but really want to, thank you for listening to us. And they may seem a bit, in the details, but I trust you working with the planning department that all of these items will get further refined. And starting with this image is a great one. I think that the materiality, the Morin panels that you talked about with the shadowing, et cetera, I think are really excellent choices. The cornice that breaks up on the lighter volumes, I'm a little less convinced. Morin panels by nature have that shadowing already, and I just wonder that cornice projecting out is unnecessary, and would it just be a little bit cleaner if it had a more subtle conclusion rather than a cornice? Something to think about.
The top or the fifth story?
No, I'm talking about the top, how you're capping the top of the building of the lighter panels. It creates a crenellation that I don't think is intentional when it stops at the vertical ribbings. And I just wonder, is that continuous? Is it more of a negative shadow? If you go to slide 23, you have a band between the 4th and 5th floor. That's like a negative channel revealed. And I just wonder if something that subtle happens at the top would just be more in line with the material choice that the Morin has, rather than projecting cornice or element at the top. The paving, I'm going back to the courtyard. The paving, I think, is, fantastic. I'm glad to see that. I wonder if it could extend just a little bit more, and I know by adding more, it just costs more money, but if it could even signal pathways to entry to building 4A and 4B. I do think that cars will mostly be concealing it, so where can you take advantage of revealing the patterns when cars aren't on, parking on those spaces? Exterior lighting, I just want to repeat honestly with my fellow commissioners' comments, Sykes and Hussein, about lighting. I was missing that element of the lighting and the landscaping that has improved so well. And then the last comment I had is, if we go to slide 17, at the corner here, I just question if the fabric awning is necessary at this corner entry piece. I understand it at all of the windows having, that welcoming retail component, but at this corner moment where the fabric wraps, it feels unnecessary because the articulation of the architecture really defines that entry. And I wonder if you do something a little bit more structured canopy, like 4A, where you have, if you go to an image of 4A where you have the corner, you have a structured canopy.
Corner too.
Yeah, and there too. So I think those are small points. I just didn't have fun in subcommittee with my fellow commissioners. I wanted to throw those details in.
Thank you.
Is that lobby at corner or is that retail at corner?
This is the lobby at 4B. And then retail on the other side.
I don't see any other commissioners raising hands or making comments. We I think are wrapping up. So I think now we just have to have a motion for a recommendation.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all right, I'm going to call on all of the commissioners. Linda Easley,
Yes.
Jonathan Garland,
Yes.
Anna is recused, David Hussein,
Yes.
Mick Youngkin, yes. Kathy Koderitis,
Yes.
Anne Marie Lubina,
Yes.
David Manfredi,
Yes.
Catherine Morris,
Yes.
David Nagahiro,
Yes.
Laura Solano,
Yes.
Kirk Sykes,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Congratulations. The project is recommended to. Thank you very much.
We never clapped when it was all virtual.
Wow, applause. That's new.
Thank you very much.
I know, seriously. 15 years.
Yes. So we're going to take a 5-minute break as we reconvene the room, change to the next presenter, and move the model from the back table to the front table.
I'm being consulting. No. Yeah. But she's getting more and more neutralized because, she's not even, she's getting like Sydney was somewhat of balance on full-time, just as a woman. But I think
International Skiing History Association Film Award.
Kirk, Ms. Shauna, you're not on mute.
Yes, I'm using my break. Sorry, thank you for telling me though.
Okay, confirming that folks online can hear us again?
We can.
Great.
Excellent. All right, well, we are staying on time. We have allowed 60 minutes for the next project, which is the Wentworth Institute of Technology, IMP Amendment, and 550 Huntington Avenue project. This will be the fourth presentation of the proposed amendment to the approved IMP and its associated project that we will review. The project was introduced on September 9th at the monthly meeting. The last subcommittee meeting, but the commissioners in attendance were Easley, Smith, Hassan, Foderitas, Manfredi, and Morris. That on November 18th. I don't think that is correct because Hassan was recused. So I'm just wondering, did I get that wrong?
I think I was there.
You were there, Charlotte?
And I think I was there
Okay.
as well.
Apologies, I got the notes incorrect. So commissioners in attendance were Garland, Kim, Nagahiro, Easley, Smith, Kathy, Foderitas, Manfredi, and Morris.
I was there. I don't think McYoung was there.
And
Oh, I wasn't there.
You're the first.
I apologize. We just got the notes wrong.
hi, Mimi.
Anyway, we had a large attendance and hopefully excellent comments. I was not there.
Mimi.
Planning department staff. Yes.
This is Laura. I was there.
Excellent. Okay. This is on November 18th. Okay. So we're looking to all of your comments following that subcommittee and all of the changes that have happened. The planning department staff that has managed this project include Carolyn C.J. Smith, Scott Slarsky, and John Stewart Fishback, who are in the room with us. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to the proponents to review the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all commissioners for your time this evening and throughout the entire process. I'm Matt Pierce from Perkins & Wells. We have
Michelle Crowley from Crowley Cottrell, landscape architect.
And then online will be Anthony Fox, landscape architect at Perkins & Wells, collaborating with Crowley Cottrell. We've been asked to go through first the IMP amendment and then roll straight through the residence hall design, and then we'll have discussion after those two parts of the presentation. So beginning with the master plan, as Commissioner Love was just describing, this is just the overview of the timeline of the project, filing the PNF the end of July, having that first full committee meeting with you all September 9th, and then coming back for the fourth meeting after two subcommittee meetings today. And I will say, you know, you can see there's been a lot of meetings back and forth, working really directly and closely with the planning staff. And I think between the VCDC and the planning staff, I think we all feel that the project has really benefited from the diversity of viewpoints that people have brought to the project, and we're really proud of the results. So just for those of you who haven't seen this since that first meeting, a quick recap. The reason we were amending the IMP was a new directive to get more beds on campus sooner in Wentworth, and along with that, getting those beds to house the entire first-year class, so they would all have to share the same foundational experience that would help with student success. And also this changed from having another residence hall on Huntington Avenue to replacing that with an academic building with a presence on the Avenue of the Arts. And in doing so, taking the opportunity to improve some of the open space characteristics that were in the 2024 IMP, and also some of the pedestrian connections that were part of that 2024 version. So, and two of the really motivating factors is reconfiguring. There was a change in scale for this building, going from about 400 beds to 970 plus or minus beds. That caused us to also look at basically making that Pike Residence Hall location a different configuration, in large part due to these two existing buildings, which couldn't be vacated until this building came online. So that necessitated part of this amendment to the IMP. So on the left is what you all saw in the first full committee meeting, our progress, the 2024 IMP version, which had a residence hall on Huntington Avenue and an academic building on the quad. what you all saw in the middle was the first iteration of the full committee meeting, and then where we've arrived by this meeting. I think the main points that we've addressed throughout that process are kind of refining the massing of the Huntington building, both how it relates to other buildings in the area and the neighborhood, alignment of buildings in the neighborhood versus Huntington Avenue. Really a lot of refinement to the character of the two new open spaces and how they connect and interface with the pike, and also a lot of work on that north-south connection from Ruddle Street down to the pike, and how that negotiates and kind of separates itself from loading the combined buildings. So Anthony will then talk about some of the landscape framework aspects of the IMP.
Anthony, if you're there, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, I think we can hear you now.
Great, thank you. We just want to return to the big vision of the campus landscape, which is a vision for spaces not as isolated projects, but really a connected family of open spaces that together create a vibrant ecosystem for student life. These Western open spaces centered on residential life are designed as places of respite and recharge. We're thinking of these not as quads, but as sheltered, human-scaled outdoor rooms, places that have distinct identity, flexibility, and support students throughout the day and the evening. We also recognize that the Pike is the most important pedestrian spine on campus and is also the strongest point of connection to the surrounding neighborhoods. So we've really began to envision a series of south-facing open spaces tied directly to the Pike and carefully shaped by the massing of these three new buildings, the Quad Residence Hall, the Pike Residence Hall, and the Mass Art Treehouse, which is existing today. When we think about campus coherence and the identity of the landscape, one question that kept coming up in guiding our work is how are we going to create coherence? When Commissioner Kim challenged us to think about in terms of a singular gesture, we really realized that the answer wasn't one space, but it was a family of spaces with similar spatial forms, but having complementary expression. And then following Commissioner Eastley's insight to let the canopy follow the sun, we opened the southern half to let sunlight in and gathered the trees to the north. And that led to a pretty simple but powerful idea. Let's let the trees shape the architecture of the space, a grove at one end and a glade at the other. And in the east, the grove becomes an outdoor room grounding a generous lawn. And in the west, a broad, flexible surface opens into a glade, a space defined by sky, light, and openness. Since our first meeting, we've made rather significant changes in direct response to some really thoughtful comments and feedback. The plan has been significantly rethought, both in the landscape and in the building massing. I think broadly, the request was for stronger integration between the building and the landscape, greater distinction in the open space, better climate response, and a more vibrant student experience. Here you can see the dashed blue lines show where the outline of the building massing was in our first meeting, and we've reshaped the massing to engage more strongly east and west, shortened it north-south by 26.5 feet, and shifted it north as well to create a much better relationship to the Pike. In the landscape, we've moved from the idea of gardens to courtyards, spaces designed to be flexible, active, and alive year-round. We've opened the south ends to the sun, and in the west courtyard created a broad stone dust surface that invites movement, gathering, and choice. And along the Pike, we've carefully shaped a comfortable and welcoming edge. And then to the east, the glade, the design centers on a generous, flexible gathering space for the display of Wentworth student-led fabrications and art, anchored by a signature colorful benches. And to the north, we've reduced pavement with planting and clarified pedestrian movements. This diagram shows how the program aligns with these spaces, dining engaging the glade to the west and the student commons engaging the grove to the east, reinforcing the idea that the life of the buildings and the life of the landscape are really working together. And this plan summarizes some of the big changes we've made, along with some of the minor but really important changes, like adding vertical hedges to mitigate wind in the courtyard and along the north-south connector, along with reducing the amount of pavement to almost the bare minimum in the vehicular areas to maximize contiguous planting areas. And so stepping back, this redesign sequence of spaces creates a simpler, more cohesive environment, one that's built really around flexibility. In the west, the glade is conceived as a bronze stodust surface court framed by planting, anchored by an informal grove and movable tables and chairs to activate the space, drawing students outside for dining, study, and socializing. Finally, inspired by Commissioner Kim's call for a visual draw and by Wentworth's culture of craft and making, we really see there's an opportunity to use custom illuminated elements and benches and a bold circular seating form to create a year-round magnet, something that's distinctly Wentworth, that connects the campus fabric and gives students a true sense of ownership over their space. To the east, the Grove is its complement, a larger, sunnier, and organized around an open lawn, supporting everything from quiet study to performances. And last, along the Pike, we've strengthened the landscape to make it both a path and a place, with active seating pockets and contiguous planting. And this plan shows how the long-term IMP plan translates into the near-term plan that's focused on the Pike Residence Hall with existing conditions adjacent. And I'll pass it back to Matt.
Great. So then moving from landscape to building massing, there are a number of kind of overarching kind of high-level comments that we heard both from DCDC and from the planning staff. One around, you know, could we simplify the podium to the Pike Residence Hall, which I kind of these kind of three pieces that were staggered in plan. A better resolution of the relationship of the Huntington Academic Building to Huntington Avenue and to the other buildings, and a question around what other massing studies did we do that led to this mapping that we then refined, working together quite a bit with planning staff. So we did, in response to that, simplify the podium mapping of the Pike Residence Hall, and I think that you'll see that in some of the views that it becomes much more clear. We looked at the way that other buildings in the neighborhood relate to Huntington Avenue, and generally the base of the building, and also in keeping with the Avenue of the Arts design guidelines, kind of holds the street wall, while the upper taller parts of the building tend to align with the kind of neighborhood grid and not with Huntington Avenue. So we've carried that through into the Huntington Academic Building. And then we did quite a bit of, we shared with staff and also with in the subcommittee some of the very different initial massings we studied to then get to the one that we spent a lot of time refining with staff and leading to, as I was saying earlier, shortening the building north to south by about 27 feet, sliding the building 5 feet north to create a little bit more distance from the kind of travel part of the Pike to create a transition zone. And then creating a little bit more difference in the height of the two wings of the building, which you can see a little better in this view from the south with the Pike in the foreground. So you can see the change to the kind of two masses at the podium of the building and the change in shape of the Huntington Academic Building as well. We have a few comparative views just to see on the left-hand side is the original massing of the Pike Residence Hall, and to the right, how that has changed. And a lot of this was working together closely with staff. As I was kind of explaining to Commissioner Love earlier, we basically when we shortened the building, we took some units from the plan, moved them to the top of the east wing of the building to create a little more hierarchy between those two pieces, to create a little bit more of an attractive skyline. The view of that from the south, from Ward Street, on the right-hand side here in the view is that quad future residence hall building. And then on Huntington Avenue, looking both north and south. On the left-hand view, looking east and west. Looking to the east, you can see how the base, the 80-foot base, about 4 stories, aligns with Huntington Avenue, and then the face of the academic building becomes parallel with the face of the treehouse. And then on the other side, the view kind of from the entry drop-off court of the Museum of Fine Arts. And 2 more views from the south. So that's the IMP portion of the presentation, and then we'll move on to the specific design of the building, the Pike Residence Hall, and the landscape that accompanies that. So in really developing the, beyond just the massing and the kind of planning of the building, when we got into the architectural expression of the building, we really thought a lot about what would make this uniquely expressive of Wentworth and their own culture and mission. And we arrived on this approach of being purposefully bold. So doing, having a bold building, but that is built on a foundation of clear ideas. And thinking of the envelope of the building, when we looked at precast concrete as a material, thinking of that as something that could be very expressive and very kind of plastic, and that we could use in a kind of sculptural way in terms of the relief but also the textural elements that help enhance shadow and light. And then finally, thinking about the representation of kind of the student within the whole and those individuals coming together as one campus and one student body. So we figured we'd start off with a few of the kind of ground level views moving around and then get into plans and more diagrammatic illustration. So we spent quite a bit of time on the development of the relationship of the Pike, the character of the Pike, and as Anthony described, the open spaces that connect to it. And I think with the changes to the length of the building and moving the building away, I think we worked really closely with staff and also with the comments from the BCDC to really calibrate that space between the kind of portion of the Pike for movement and the portion for gathering. So, and getting that right, there's enough space to gather, but not so much that it feels too empty or lacking in energy. So that was a really good, I think, productive process. As we move around, this is a view of that really flexible surface to the west side of the Pike Residence Hall and also to next to the treehouse. With that kind of unified, very flexible surface, we can have very kind of expressive and fun and loose, flexible seating in that area. The dining pavilion, which is this two-story glass line, is projected out. We kind of extended out in this direction. We moved the entry to the dining to this side of the building so that we bring people through the open space.
Can you do us a favor?
Sure.
Sorry to advise against people who are not here.
Yeah.
Can one of your team members point
Oh.
the model? I mean, you brought this great model. Just as we're
Sure.
going through.
Good call, you want to do?
We're right here, right?
Yes, looking this way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Could you
one
put
thing
that
that
in? I
comes
didn't
up.
want to touch it. Okay.
We're looking from here, looking
Okay,
this way.
so keep going.
Yep. So we put the entry to the dining on the west side instead of from the Pike side, so that we were pulling some people through that open space and helping to activate that. And then in terms of the building materiality, introducing some warm tones that sort of weave themselves in with the cooler tones of the precast, so we get a nice kind of complementary palette. We move around. This is the view as you're coming from Huntington Avenue, moving down towards the Pike, crossing through that open space. To the left here is that a visual placeholder for that rotating installation by students from Wentworth. So there's often a lot of schools that have design programs and architecture programs have a process of making things and displaying those within the campus. I thought that would be a great idea, a great way of expressing the identity and the creativity of Wentworth and kind of activating the space. You can see the benches that Anthony referred to earlier. We're going to be working on those and the actual details of those in much more detail moving forward and kind of customizing those. And then there's been a fair amount of thought too into how this very unified, simplified surface can also work during the winter time that Misha will talk about, and that configuration of the tree canopy towards the northern end of this, the two open spaces where there's more shade from the buildings, and as you move closer to the Pike, less canopy and more ease that access to the sun. So this is the winter view of that space where there's part of that ground surface that Misha can describe later. We'll make that maintainable and still usable throughout the winter.
Add about 5 minutes left.
Okay. The view from the Pike with the dining on the left here, again with that kind of interstitial zone where the seating wraps around from the dining and that western open space around to the south side with the Pike, and creating that nice zone of transition for people to gather and hang out. And then looking back to the west, where this is the in the foreground, the student commons on the ground floor, where we've simplified that kind of three-part massing. It was sort of tracking through from the upper tower massing and simplified those to really represent the program of the dining and the program of this ground floor student commons, and also bringing in those warm tones into the curtain wall and the power windows as well. And then this is looking north from that north-south connector from Ruggles down to the Pike, looking back to Ruggles here. And we really worked both to, again, extend this pavilion out to the east and create that two-story scale, rearrange the program on this side so that this, what you're seeing off to the left, are really active open spaces where people will congregate, not offices or more kind of cellular spaces. And then kind of weaving in, as we bring the precast material down to the ground so you can actually experience that up close, the texture and the relief of those, kind of interweaving this layer of the metal surrounds that helps carry through that two-story datum.
So this is the site plan for Phase 1, showing how it fits within the existing campus framework. Phase 1 focuses on 3 key moves: establishing a continuous north-south pedestrian connection, strengthening the Pike as a primary campus artery, and introducing a new flexible outdoor room for campus life. Here you can see the north-south connection running the full length of the site, organizing pedestrian movement and tying Huntington and Ruggles directly to the Pike. Secondary to that is minimizing the vehicular areas to a seldom used service court and a small parking lot. Next slide. Zooming into the southern portion of the site, we can see these design moves in greater detail. Along the east edge, we're pulling pavement away from existing buildings to create space for transplanted trees, planting, and bike racks. To the south is the Pike, where the landscape connects directly to the new residence hall terraces, supporting everyday movement, gathering, and campus life. From there, moving west, the porous paving courtyard introduces flexibility, stormwater performance, and the kind of year-round activity Anthony described earlier. Just to the north of the courtyard, an enclosed bike shelter helps screen the service area from the courtyard, and adjacent to that, we're also improving the connection to Huntington between existing buildings. The ground plan is intentionally simple and cohesive. Asphalt is limited to vehicular areas, and campus standard concrete reinforces the continuity along primary paths. Accent paving of exposed aggregate concrete enhances the indoor-outdoor experience of the Pike Residence Hall. It extends across the Pike and continues as defined circulation routes through the courtyard, ensuring clear, durable access year-round. Surrounding those paths, porous decomposed granite softens the space, supports stormwater performance, and allows the courtyard to remain flexible and functional across seasons. Planting responds directly to the site's solar and wind conditions and builds on the grove and glade logic Anthony described earlier. A mix of deciduous and evergreen trees, shrubs, and ground covers is placed deliberately to shape comfort, enclosure, and seasonal experience across Phase 1. Lighting in Phase 1 supports safety, continuity, and identity. We're reusing campus standard fixtures along the Pike and the walks to the north, introducing a new fixture for vehicular areas and using festive catenary lighting to activate the courtyard year-round. In tighter conditions around the east path, building mounted lighting provides both facade expression and clear pedestrian visibility. Speaking of facades, back to you.
Great, thanks. So we'll wrap up the presentation with the exterior envelope of the building. And this is somewhere that we, again, you see in the top right image here, we really thought about how we could be inventive and expressive with concrete, precast concrete as a material, how that could be dynamic and responsive to the movement of the sun, but also be expressive of the internal organization and workings of the building. So the diagram in the top left explains how they're on the floors, there are 2 communities per floor. They each have their own kind of social spaces that have unique attributes, and then every other floor has different offerings. So it's a way of inducing movement and connection between the floor level communities, and that's been expressed in this kind of ascending and overlapping pattern that's on the facade. And then that's complemented by what's in the bottom left diagram in yellow are the transparent areas, which are the social spaces of the building, the dining, the ground level commons, and then the floor level commons, and culminating at the top with the flexible event space. Those materials then tie in with both the older and the newer buildings on the campus, the newer buildings which have the more neutral palette, and some of those historic buildings here, Wentworth Hall, which has both the warm toned brick and then these even warmer toned kind of ornamental details on the Ruggles Street facade, are things that we've tied in with these kind of modern materials. So what we heard both from BCDC and the planning staff that we responded to as we developed this further was thinking more about the north-south elevations and how they relate to the broader size of the building, how we think about those kind of in the round, and how does that turn the corner. And also the idea of introducing this warmer tone to the building, and also kind of adding a little bit more detail to the kind of glass volumes of the pavilions for dining and for the student commons. So the ways that we responded to this were really, you can see in this corner view how that kind of ascending triangular pattern wraps up the broad face of the building and then turns and continues to ascend around the narrow ends and the north and south ends of the building. The way we've incorporated this warm toned metal material into the curtain wall on the ground floor, but then also interwoven that into the portions of the tower, where the precast comes down to the ground and kind of interwoven this two-story layer through that. And then echo that also at the top of the building where we sort of elongate the top of the taller tower, which has the event space on top and also screening mechanical equipment. And then also differentiating that core, which is the connector piece between the two residential wings.
If you can wrap up, please.
Yep. The materials, just two examples on the top of that kind of bronze and metal for the windows and kind of metal accents, and then two colors of concrete, the darker one for the center core of the building and the lighter one, and two different finishes of sandblasting to help accentuate the shadows created by the release of the panel. So coming back to this view, 500 Huntington Sweeney Field, to your left here, looking back at the north end of the Pike Residence Hall, to the right is the treehouse, and then swinging back around to the Pike, looking back towards Huntington Avenue. And I think we're really excited. I think this space is, it's super active today. There's hundreds of people who transit the Pike every day, and I think we're really excited about the way this is going to transform this from a place to move through to also a place to gather and to connect. So with that, we'll conclude our presentation.
Excellent. Commissioners, comments? Maybe we should start with comments on the IMP amendment. Is there any comments related to that? And we'll move to 515.
Could we go back?
Sure.
And Mimi, to kind of go back to the discussion of who was at which meeting, I think the first subcommittee meeting was really focused on the IMP, and the second was focused more specifically on the specific expression, as I understand it. Or at least.
Yes, and I think just to read into the record, I believe, Commissioners, tell me if I got this right, at the last meeting, Garland, Nagahiro, Gilly Smith, Kodoridis, Manfredi, Morris, and did I miss anybody? We'll go back.
And Marie said she was there too.
And Anne Marie.
I was at the October meeting, just to clarify, not the last one.
Yeah, I don't think I was.
I think I was the only landscape architect at the November meeting.
Could you maybe flip to the slide where you show the original approved IMP, the later one, and then where you are today? So, I mean, I'll start off. I mean, I'm seeing the middle image and the one to the far right. To me, this is almost one of those charts where you say what's changed, like you're looking and you're trying to find out what's different. The most noticeable is that bump in the back, in the middle image where you have the volume sort of projecting more into the surface lot. And I like the fact that that's removed because I do think that helps to simplify the overall reading of the tower, the Part 2, which I want to save some comments for that when we get into the design portion. But I do think that just alleviates some space at the base. It helps probably with operations as you're showing in the plan to the far right. But beyond that, I had generally from the prior meetings expressed support for the directional change that you're going in versus the original IMP. I guess I'm pleased to see that it's still along those lines.
Thanks, Jonathan. David Manfredi.
Thank you, Mimi. I think I was a big supporter from the unveiling of the current scheme for a couple of very simple reasons. And you reviewed them again tonight. The Glade and the Grove, both with their orientation to the south. I was really attracted to the kind of meter between the treehouse building and the Glade, and then the Pike residence and the Grove, and then the future quad residence building. I think that's going to be very strong. But there's also a clarity in what I'll call this kind of north-south sort of north-south grain of pathways where there's a series of direct connections to the Pike. And the Pike, I think, is such a strong feature of this campus and important in the, you know, it's more than Wentworth. It's connectivity into the colleges of the Fenway. And I just think if you look at the plan on the right, and it's the campus and the campus buildings and open spaces open themselves to the Pike as opposed to make another internal quad that doesn't kind of participate in that big idea of the colleges of the Fenway. I think the master plan has improved remarkably, and very happy to endorse it.
Great. I think the breakthrough is the changing of the grain of the buildings going north-south and picking up on, one of the things that's so prominent as you're going down Huntington is to see the treehouse building and not wanting that to feel compromised in any way because it's so prolific visually. And I like that you had changed the shape of the Huntington to be very respectful of that. The other is the Pike and Anthony's point on the family spaces, which I think is a really nice way to break up the green space. And you can see those spaces being wildly successful with the students. Pike Phase, and I'm happy to see that you showed it in but I can see that that would be popular at the same. The idea of the service strategy of our two really maximum on the three sides of the residence hall to have activating really not only the green spaces but the Pike as well. So image 12 I think is really fantastic actually. When we think about a plan and really understanding the ground plans of all the adjacent buildings, this is very successful in thinking about how these landscapes engage the existing buildings as well as the new buildings, anticipating them in the future. So, I know Emery, this is probably one of the images that you like very much because she always asks for going beyond the confines of property art. And this one was really nicely successful because you really think about the mass art building having its own presence and not really losing that in actually enhancing it. You have comments about the building, but I'll hold on for that. Very nice.
I'll chime in too. If we go back to slide 6, I agree that the improvements, make a whole lot of sense, even just from a practical, standpoint, having all the residents maintain while you're building the building, and the orientation, the north-south orientation makes really, really good sense to me. I think what I also really like that's happening on the Avenue of the Arts is all of the institutions have their own tower. Mass Art has its treehouse, and Northeastern has a Coterie Center, and Wentworth has the Huntington Academic Building. What's happening physically in the model, though, is I really like the height of the academic building. I just wonder if the stepping of the academic building is in the highest point is in the right location compared to, 550 Huntington. It's just a question that I have because I just wonder if you push the height, further, I think this is north, further this way, if this became a little bit more in relationship to this building and you shifted this. Yeah, I don't know, it won't work right there. Yeah, it's kind of like this, does that, I also like the, relationship of the tower. Something to think about. Again, it's not a question of height. I like the height. I just worry about the relationship of, there's a lot of height in one concentrated area adjacent to the glade. And I am actually curious if the model follows exactly what's happening in plan, because I'm having a hard time making the connection of what I'm seeing in the model to the plan.
No, it's the plan on the right.
Yeah, on the right. It's kind of
Hidden by people.
Yeah, so this is I think the
podium.
the speaker view might be covering that part of the plan on the screen there, but, yeah, this is the, 80-foot tall portion with I think it's about a 40-foot gap to the, mass art there. And I think this stepping actually has to do with the, setback guidelines in the Avenue of the Arts.
I see.
So there may be things,
Okay.
I appreciate your point, and I think that sounds like a great suggestion.
At some point, you're going to come back to have
Oh, yeah.
that building reviewed, and so at that point, it might be worth coming with a couple of massing considerations.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that's obviously not the definitive mapping. It's one way that can be realized within the framework of the master plan.
Okay, I see, Commissioner Gillis-Smith and Sykes' hands. I didn't see who went up, so I'm just going to go with Shauna. Go ahead.
I'm jealous of everyone there with the model, and you know, the snacks, of course. But so tonight is a good advertisement for in-person meetings. So I think most of my comments are on the specifics, but I'll start with the kind of IMP comments, and then I can come back later. I really do love this idea of the glade in the grove. I think that was actually an extremely strong discovery and invention. And the other couple aspects that I do love are the relationship to the pike, the sort of staggered relationship of the planting, the paving, and the building mass, so that it becomes a very sort of animated and interesting relationship instead of kind of a monotonous relationship, which is actually so interesting, kind of given the staggering of even just different institutions organized along the pike. I also think, because we don't have the October meeting here, but I think that the north-south pedestrian connector has become much stronger, which was one of my comments from the last meeting. I think it's much more clear and easier to navigate that, that sort of blurred area between the vehicular service area. And I appreciate the significant planting on either side of that neck as it goes through the vehicular area. So I appreciate that very much. And then my other comments are more when we zoom into the design of the specific areas.
Hey, Shauna. Kirk Sykes?
Got it there. Thank you. Yeah, I think I have macro and micro public realm comments. First of all, I like the layout very much. And I also, Mimi, agree with you just in terms of the character of Huntington and the nature of the academic building. And to that degree, I think I like the residence hall very much as a backdrop, as a texture, and not competing with the signature institutional towers. I guess the one more micro public realm, if you want to call it that.
Kirk, can I interrupt for a second? We lost
Sure.
you right at your important point. So if you could rephrase that would be excellent.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Audible in the room. Yes.
Okay, no, I was saying, I agree with your comments, Mimi, about the signature towers of the institutions on Avenue of the Arts, and that the Huntington Academic Building has a real opportunity, as do other institutions, to express themselves. And then, therefore, I was saying I very much like that the pike, in its textural skin and simplicity, is sort of a backdrop, but has its own character. So I agree with the approach, and I think there's a great opportunity there to further sculpt the Huntington Academic Building. Are you guys still getting me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so moving to what I was describing as more micro public realm, uh, the Pike versus Avenue of the Arts, tall towers, et cetera. I think the Pike has further opportunities. I mean, I love the Grove and the Glade, and that they are very defined characters. You've thought a lot about them. I think that the Pike still has some opportunities, given its linearity, given its length, given the view in from Huntington, given the amount of activity connected to the Glades and the Grove. Whether it's in the form of activating the pavement or thinking about lighting the trees to draw you down the distance, or maybe even expressing the engineering character of Wentworth in some technological innovation that can uniquely happen in a long, wider space versus the quieter Glade and Grove. I guess I challenge you to think about the Pike, and sometimes these pikes just end up being connectors, and I guess I feel that way about some of the hospitals, that there's even greater opportunity to find their importance as conduits. And so I would challenge you to think about a slightly different character than the gray robe, the expression of the Pike, and how that could happen. So that's the extent of my comments. Thank you.
So, Kirk, I think we lost a little bit of that, but we got most of it. Can I just make sure I understand what you're referring to as the Pike? Is it the building or the connection, the north-south connector?
Or east-west.
Yeah, or east-west. Okay. Okay.
Is that working better? Can you all hear me a little better now?
Yeah,
Okay, guess the earbuds don't work so well. Sorry. The Pike being the longer linear. Go ahead, baby. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was referring to, the Pike being the longer linear connector that I believe abuts the Glade and the Grove, correct?
Okay, yeah. Okay, good, yeah.
Yeah, and I was just saying the character of that space, given its width and its length and its connectivity to Huntington, to me seems to offer some opportunities to make a more dynamic space. You know, to some degree, there's very nice plantings and I can look down the distance, but you know, even the use of the campus standard light pole. I guess I imagine that Pike could really have a very dynamic character that might even express the Wentworth engineering heritage out to Avenue of the Arts. You know, in some ways, you know, the Museum of Fine Art comes out and meets it with a sculpture. You have an opportunity to come out and meet it with something else, and maybe something that is more akin to drawing people through the space as opposed to a more passive space like the Glade and Grove. That was the comment.
Thanks for clarifying. That
Yeah.
helps me at least.
Thank you.
Anne Marie?
Thank you, Mimi. I wonder, so I've been looking at slide 13. Could you go back to a plan? I'm looking at the draft presentation, slide 13. And then I recall, as I mentioned earlier, I was at the October meeting, and I know you appreciate the alternatives you shared with the building massing, and I'm pleased to see the residence hall becoming more compact, you know, less stretched out. I agree with my colleagues that putting the academic building on Huntington Avenue makes a lot of sense. I'm still, every time I look at this plan, I also appreciate the having the ground floor, you know, building plan on this drawing because it helps to explain some detail. I recall an earlier presentation where you had a diagram that showed pathways through the campus. Do you have that available tonight?
Yeah, I have the previous presentation. Let's see if, and this one.
I'm glad you remember specifically which one that was. I went through everything because I guess the question I have is each time, thank you, I think that is it. So each time I look at the current proposal, I intuitively imagine as a student walking, and I realize there's some phased, construction here, but I keep wanting to come in the side. I guess it would be the northeast side of the residence hall. So you introduced an entry on the other side, and I too like the Grove and the Glade idea. But intuitively, it seems like there ought to be another entry into that space. And I realize this is a little contradictory to the idea of the Pike, but it seems like the Pike is sort of the public, kind of the concourse through the campus. But so often what happens in campus or campus complexes or districts of buildings, I think some of where the really successful design details occur are where there are ways to connect through buildings. So imagine it's a cold 20-degree Boston winter day. How can I most quickly get from one place to another? And it seems like I'll have to go around the building, rather than through, just given the length, I guess, of the residence hall. My instinct is that there ought to be some internal connection that goes roughly east to west. And you all are more familiar with the patterns on campus. I see this this diagram that you have up on the screen has the Pike, it has the north-south connections. But I keep wondering, if I were a student coming from Wentworth Hall, wouldn't I be inclined to go diagonally through what is now one of the new green spaces? I'm sorry, I don't know if it's the Glade or the Grove. I guess it's the Glade rather than the Grove, I believe.
The eastern space.
Yes, there, right. It just seems like that's a very long stretch of building. And I know we're talking about the master plan and not the building right now. And I really appreciate the changes you've made in the design that we've gotten a glimpse of. But it seems like that's a very long stretch of unrelieved building for an important passageway. And is there an opportunity to introduce across, a corridor or some entry that breaks it up? So right now you basically have one point of entry in a very long building and something that is meant to be sort of a centerpiece for this part of campus.
Yeah, I guess that reminds me, I should point out, we do have I don't know if it's highlighted here, make sure I have the right presentation. There is a bike, an entry off the side here, basically between the bike room and the student commons, and these are the resident director offices over here. So there is, I think we didn't put a time on it, but essentially there's a set of doors that come in right in this area right here.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was service. I'm sorry?
Sorry, Anne-Marie. I think one of the nice things too about the model is that there is this really beautiful glassy sort of podium that's kind of holding 3/4 of that open space. And if we're recalling correctly from what you just described, there seems to be some maybe portal that connects through. But I think there could be an opportunity, I think even through more of that common space, to allow for entry through that sort of glassy volume that's connecting both the Grove and the Glade as sort of, one open space connector. I think that's a really, really nice move.
I think it would just really bring
a way to, connect it.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry I can't be there to see the model. I think in future occasions, if there's a way that we can get some maybe photographs of the model, in advance for those of us who can't be there in person. But I think again that I've always been, I think as my comments have indicated, a little concerned about this building. I really applaud the idea of, again, the shift in the program of between the two buildings, the intention of having all of the freshmen in one building and, freeing up housing, much needed housing in the city of Boston. But I think this building, the residential building, really is a centerpiece, becomes the centerpiece of this new piece of campus? And how can it feel a little bit more, not just permeable, but just operate a little bit more as a centerpiece and less as it still feels like it's a little bit of a bisector within this campus. So I think if you can take that, if you can maybe do more to create that east-west corridor on the north side of the building, I think that would go a long way in really creating a sense of place and a sense of community on the campus and for the residents in this building. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne Marie. Laura Solano?
Thank you. First of all, I'll tell you that I think this plan is just so good. You have solved so many things that people were worried about. And one thing I'd like to reinforce is something that Kirk said about what happens on the Pike circulation. And I think that there was a discussion about lighting, which I really appreciate because people don't go into that enough. And there was a motion to keep what I think are the globe lights. You don't need to flip to that slide, but I would encourage you to think about these two moves with the landscape as setting up a new expression of the landscape, and to really take the chance and use this as an opportunity to kind of refresh some of those, frankly, kind of staid and, old lighting, the old lighting that you see in so many campuses and, historic. They're the wrong scale. They don't, put out great light. So I would just encourage you to think about this as you're doing more on the IMP, how you can start to transition those kinds of things on campus. And I am completely blown away by the changes to the service court, because that's one of the hardest things to really make a real difference with. And so I just have to applaud the team for giving up a lot of that space and letting the landscape kind of encroach on that. And I have other comments on the Glade, but I'll wait till we move to that discussion. But thank you. It's a really nice plan.
Thanks, Laura. Catherine Morris?
Good evening. I
good
want to double down on everyone, all the commissioners around just the progression of this project. How it started was a very unique puzzle, and now it feels more of like a circle, more of a completion when you're shooting up at 30,000 feet. So I just want to applaud you in just the progression of this. I do definitely want to double down on Commissioner Sykes about the Pike. For all of the thoughtfulness that's gone to the buildings, the shaving of things, adding texture, there is real opportunity with that Pike to have a stronger relationship with the other buildings that you spent so much time on. So just really want to encourage you all to think about that. I don't know if it's more so the design. I think in earlier conversations, there was many recommendations around how to change the texture or the color of that Pike to feel more warm and embracing, and some of that's been lost along the way. But I do definitely want to just lift up that there's still great opportunity with the Pike, given that it is wide. You don't want to lose that essence, as people will be using that, both the public and students, faculty and staff. You just don't want to lose that either with it.
Excellent. Linda, please.
Thanks, Mimi. I was at the last subcommittee as well, and what strikes me seeing this presentation between those two times is how much attention you've spent to simplifying and getting kind of the big idea more legible, and I really appreciate that. I had a comment about the north-south connector, and I'll also piggyback on some of the comments on the Pike with maybe a slightly different perspective. I think this campus is tricky, right? Because you're connecting these pedestrian passages over vehicular ways, pavement. So you do that from the north, off of Ruggles Street, where pedestrians have to come and essentially cross the mouth of the service drive and then continue on toward the Pike. And on that north-south connector, I'm still a little bit concerned, and I know we'll get to a little bit more detail on the facades here, about the length of wall on the res hall along that north-south connector, and just wanting to make sure and ensure that that pedestrian experience is as good as it can be, since you'll be bracketed by the power plant on one side and be bracketed by some pretty low activity uses on the Pike Res Hall. So I'd love to just think a little bit more about that. On the Pike, from an urban design perspective, I was here a couple of weeks ago, walking actually across the Avenue of the Arts from the west. And what was really interesting to me is that you have a pretty successful pocket park, and I think we talked about that at subcommittee. Maybe someone can point to it on the plan. This very successful pocket park that's right along Huntington, not that one, yes, that one. And then the kind of tissue that connects Huntington to the Wentworth kind of edge of the Pike, that area really falls apart. And I recognize that you don't have jurisdiction over that, but I really encourage you to think about how you might make that connection seamless. And right now you walk through, you have that pocket park on your left if you're heading toward Wentworth, and you feel like you are in another service zone, another vehicular service zone. It does not feel pedestrian. And so are there opportunities there for some collaboration, and to all of the earlier points, to really make that the bold statement coming from Huntington and be able to connect you all the way to the east. So I just wanted to bring that up in that larger context. And I don't think there's been a plan. I was looking at my slides, a plan that kind of shows us how you cross over Huntington to get a sense of where that trajectory would be. But I think it could be a really great thing to reintroduce.
Thank you, Linda. Excellent point. I think Mick Young has comments. She's gonna.
This building, should I wrap up too?
Well, no, if you could also switch over to 550 Huntington, that would be awesome, but no pressure.
Yes, absolutely. Just building on David, Kirk, and Linda's comments. I think you've done a hard thing, which is, I think the first time I saw it, there was, like, I couldn't squint. The squint test wasn't there. I couldn't really understand what the structure of the master plan, and now I really understand it. And I think there's a layer, so I agree with everything that's been said. I'm not going to re-say it. So building on that, what you've done is you've created this really powerful line. We're calling it the Pike. There's two things about the Pike I think that the master plan should think about. Maybe it doesn't get drawn, but that it's a series of guiding principles of how the Pike is defined, not just in the plan. This is what's so great about the model, but I've noticed the Pike seems like it's defined really by the result of where it plugs in.
Trees are resilient.
And so to figure out, like, this is a kind of cohesive gesture, and I can't quite tell what the master plan is trying to say about that. So, you know, there's the 1950s, Dan Kiley, you put the same tree, same kind of tree architecture, and you get a kind of canopy. Yeah. There's the downtown Tokyo, which is like you're walking through a forest, and there's evergreens, and there's all these different, a diversity. And I think that I'd like to have a better sense of character of what this really powerful thing is, because I know you can't really, I mean, the terminus of the pike is kind of too bad, but I think there are things you can do to start to manage that. The other thing which David said earlier, which I think is really important, is that you've created these 3 spaces, and I love them. They're like little light brights plugging into things. And I think that they're not different enough. I think each, or else maybe one will get popular just by proximity, but I think it would be really nice if like one was, I think Kirk was implying this, like one was kind of wild, right? Like this one, I'm going to break this model. This one has the opportunity to do that, like really be something. And so one suggestion I have, which I think my fellow
McYoung, because we can't quite see where you're pointing. So which one are you thinking has the possibility?
So if you could just the grove, the glade.
Okay, the glade. Thank you.
The third space that is against. You have like 3 shoe boxes, right? Could you point to all 3? 1, 2, and then there's a third one.
This
in front of the front, right? So you're creating, and it's very, it's in front of the treehouse. But you should think about that, right? You're part of that urban fabric. And I just, right now, the strategy you've developed is the trees create the space, but you take the architectural elements of the landscape and reinforce the trees. But I don't know if you always have to do that, because trees are very powerful, and they'll create the glade no matter what you do on the ground plane. So this is my segue into the next, which is I think in this glade, and I'm not as, I like the idea, but I think you should be very careful. It's quite shady there, to make sure that it's going to be successful, that it's going to be this, a glade is this amazing, like, you see it in Paris all the time. I just would want to make sure that it will work in this climate. But right now you've reinforced the glade with a circular, I don't know if you've seen those circular benches at MIT at the McDermott Court. Have you seen those? You should go see them. They're a little too big for gathering, so no one goes there. They're like, and this is actually bigger than that. And so as you're designing this, just think about human comfort and gathering and what's the kind of spatial, because I think the glade does the circle for you, and you may not have to reinforce it with a second kind of circle. So I would just say that, like, maybe these, you could start to see these as a sequence of things, and that they have an opportunity to be like very different, and could be really, Wentworth could use a little bit of that, like Instagrammable kind of, I know where I am when I see that image, imageability. So
I also think we've done too, it's also going to be visible from above.
Right.
Right. So I think there's something quite playful in introducing more of a human scale kit of parts that can maybe, be inspired either by the institution or an artist that starts to kind of manifest itself as it's viewed from above and sort of experienced below. So but there's something, I think, whimsical about what you can do.
So you could kind of do a lot of interesting things. Last thing I want to say is I am a little concerned about the amount of, was it DG that you were proposing? I just would look at it again. It's a lot of it. And I think that paving is an opportunity to like mark something, especially from above, something interesting. So I would just look at it, because that stuff moves around and it's hard to maintain. And I just wonder if right now you have the concrete, is it a budget issue? Is that why?
Well, that's going to be part of it, yep.
And you don't have a garage below?
No.
Okay. So that's helpful.
But,
Yeah.
But, back in the beginning, it was all vegetation.
I remember that.
But doing the
doing the stone dust, we do feel like with all the trees coming out of it and lights above with tables, that the space is big enough to handle all of that, but also small enough to, I think, be maintainable, and have the trees and the trunks be what's kind of powerful about the space,
So
rather
you don't
than a
have to
whole
put-
lot of ground plane.
You don't have to put like tree grades then if you do that.
No, we don't.
I
So
would
it's
just-
really simple.
It still feels like a lot. Think about it. And it's an opportunity to like amp the design up a little bit too, to make it more, we've used the word playful too much today, like have more kind of a unique character to Wentworth. I mean, we have a bunch of Wentworth people in our office, and they are such talented, unique minds, and I just think there's something about the school that could be reflected here. So I like the idea of lights and things like that. I think that's interesting, but that's only at night. And so.
Right. So, we're going to transition to talking about 550 Huntington, and I see Shauna's raised her hand.
Right, yeah, I think we have transitioned to the spaces. So, and Mick Young was actually touching upon a lot of the things I wanted to touch upon. So if we could maybe go to the view of the glade. So the last time, how about the other view too? The view more of, this is, so last time at the last subcommittee, I actually had, still did have concern about the stone dust myself, the long-term maintainability of it, how it can be managed, the snow can be managed. And so I still have that concern. So I strongly encourage you to do research on other campuses, urban campuses that are using this extent of stone dust to see if it really is a reasonable material over time in this condition with this climate. The other concern that I have about this space, and I love the concept. But when we talked last time, we talked about that the only gesture is that this circular bench, and that it needs to be exquisite. It really needs to be an amazing thing. And I think it's still the same that we saw the last subcommittee. It's still like a metal bench with a wooden top. I think the idea of student art is a great idea, but I don't think you can count on it, because it may be a program that Wentworth does. It may be a program that Wentworth doesn't. It's a lot of money and a lot of organization to do a significant temporary student intervention every year. And I think it's a great idea, and I think to keep pursuing it, but I also think the space has to stand on its own when that isn't there. And again, when the leaves aren't there on the trees. So that's something, again, I think that there needs to, and whether it's, maybe the scale of the benches is the wrong thing, as McKen was saying about, but my concern is really the lack of richness and lack of detail in this space, particularly given its shade. I appreciate that you guys did make a cut through the green space to go to the north, or go to the west. But the other concern, if we go back to the plan that we talked about last time, is if you do want to make a connection to, maybe the next one, the zoomed in plan a little bit. If you do want to make a connection, or have Mass Art wants to make a connection to this plaza space, I think the last time we talked about it, there was a 3-foot difference between the floor of the Mass Art, ground floor of the Mass Art building, and the glade. And that's about 60 feet of sloping walkway, which is a very significant intrusion into your space. So if that's something that you think is a good idea, I would think that you would probably want to control that as a strategy. and how that impacts the glade itself. And I do agree with Mick Young, you know, which is, I think, also what we talked about last week, that the textural richness of this space. Imagine when, you know, there's no trees and or there's no leaves on the trees. It's winter. It's a gray day. And there's only this one, you know, the tree trunks, which eventually will be really beautiful, and the one very simple, you know, large unarticulated bench. So I think in working with staff, really trying to develop kind of in the building, there's a lot of detail. We didn't discuss it very much today, but there's a lot of detail and richness in the facades and in the materials and in the articulation. And I don't think that it's there in the landscape yet. I think in the master plan level, it's actually very, very strong, but in the specific articulation, I think that needs another, you know, level of work.
Thanks, Shauna. We're gonna have our third landscape architect weigh in, Laura Solano.
I just thought we'd get the landscape over with. I have to support both what was said by Shauna and by Mick Young. And I strongly, strongly urge you to think about another material than DG, which, by the way, I love the crunch under the foot, the casualness of it. But the problem is that as a material in the urban landscape, if you do it correctly, you use the right binders, etc., it's not permeable. You shouldn't fool yourself that it is. It just isn't. And it actually has a negative effect on trees because of that factor. So enough said about that, but I'm going to jump on the wagon about that one. I think you can be more creative with that, especially for the large amounts that you have.
Laura, can I interrupt you for 1 minute? We have a comment from staff. John, you raised your hand, so I'm going to assume you wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that we have discussed this with the proponent, and one suggestion that staff floated was consideration of using a graded aggregate porous pavement. You can see some examples of this at Mount Auburn Cemetery and MIT. It's a highly porous surface. It's basically like a DG, but uses a higher range of aggregate to larger size. It allows stabilization without a binder.
That's what we're using. So
I didn't get into
I didn't intend for this to go into a specification discussion.
No,
I think that what we're saying is not we're trying to design this for you.
Right.
But we think that there could be greater complexity in the textures. That's
Yeah.
the work. Yeah.
But also, if you know, with that complexity has to come durability, and I do think that there are other materials. You can look at the Mount Auburn Cemetery, but again, this is an urban plaza with trees coming right out of this material, and trees have a hard time in the city, and so I would give them every chance possible. But let's move on from that. I'll also reinforce the bench comment. I think you have such rich materials on the building, and that bench in a color, I think, would become dated. And as Mick Young rightfully said, in plan, that circle looks interesting, but I think in terms of how it would operate to make it a welcoming and comfortable space, it may not be. And you really don't have a square foot to spare. Like these plazas have to really absorb a lot of students, especially if we're going to put all of them in, all of the beginners in this one area. So I think you've heard some really good comments from Mick Young and from Shauna.
Commissioners, any other comments? do we want to shift to the building comments itself?
I would think so.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
please.
And so, thank you for bringing this model.
Yeah, thank you.
The craft of the model is amazing,
It's just
first off,
great.
so to be applauded there. And I also appreciate going the extra mile and putting the facade texture, on the building versus some of the other blank masses, because it really helps the reading and I think will help the discussion. So I like the party and even from the IMP, sort of like doing your best to stretch these volumes, and you've created these 3 vertical bars. And then, but as I see the facade deployment of the precast, which I also think is interesting, I'm just really struggling with the choice to, you've gone this mile to kind of like separate the mass, but then the material almost like reunifies it when you've applied it both on the, I'm going to call it the higher tower and the lower tower. So I've been trying to like peek around and see views from, as a pedestrian. And one thing I worry about is just like, because the material is uniform, it could make it feel like the building is just this forever long horizontal, I don't want to call it a billboard, but it's just this long composition of facade, especially even if you can put the other building back in, the taller one. If you see it from Huntington, you sort of begin to see the building from here, and then you get the break, and then you keep seeing it. It keeps going. So is there a way to think about, I guess, more of a distinctive difference in the facade deployment? Maybe not a departure from the material, but just a different way that it's composed. Or maybe, keeping the composition, but purposely looking at one mass as precast and one mass as metal panel, or something that just, because what I think about is the Wentworth Square Tower. That's probably the closest reference point to this unique of a partie, where they had the challenge of the T-shape. And the actual execution of it, and I think I sat in on a meeting when David Hassina was giving some sort of comments and guidance on where it landed, but the ability for the larger mass to read architecturally on its own, and then there's this quiet little addition piece to a smaller, lower mass that has a distinctly different architecture. So when you're walking downtown in Federal Street and Winthrop Street and the neighborhood streets, you don't see them as one long thing snaking through the neighborhood. You actually see an individual proportion that's more like this thing is, I guess, akin to the proportion of treehouse. So that's just something to think about. And then I also really love your texture, and I wonder, why is it planar versus more volumetric? Like, why wouldn't it turn the corner? Because I think it would make the core stand out less, because it does. This piece just feels like that's the core. It sort of telegraphs itself too much from the exterior, where I think if maybe this volume and the roof line came together, and maybe the facade raft, that would feel like an L with a lower mass. So just some things to think about in terms of the deployment of the materiality. But again, I like the overall partie and what you've done to stretch out the mass across the site. It's just how the entire thing reads. That's true.
Maybe I'll go, so we're waiting for other commissioners to comment, or David, were you about to chime in?
Just wanted to see some different
I'm just going to go back to the glade, because I think that round shape, whether it's a bench or the tree shape, actually is pretty strong in plan, because it's the hinge point in plan from changing the geometry, going at an angle versus, so I, as you're contemplating the changes that are suggested by the commissioners, I wouldn't go so far as to undo what I think is actually pretty strong as a pivot point. That's just a plan, comment. I definitely defer to them in terms of of materiality. We won't talk about DG, et cetera. But I do hate when things are stuck in my shoe. In terms of the building, I think it's so handsome. I really think that you guys have done such a great job with the articulation of the wall, finding identity to Wentworth, which really, you know, speaks to what they do. The architecture engineering program, I think, would really just benefit from such a handsome building. I wonder if that comment that you were talking about in terms of feeling like a long building is it's even something as subtle as color change from one volume to the other versus like a whole change. And then the one comment that and you really see it in the model, there was a view that you had of looking, oh, well, this is perfect. The long slots that you have at the taller massing, I think are so elegant. And there was a view from Sweeney Fields that you show the end view with where I feel like you kind of lost steam at the top of this end elevation. And I even wonder if that verticality continues here rather than that big open window. Just because it's such a nice way to like terminate the top of the building on the side, and it just seems very different condition here. But
it is very beautiful, and I'm a little tired of seeing buildings where like every face is different, and there's something refreshing about this. So, was there a change in the scale, the texture, or a subtle change of color?
There's a very subtle thing that may be hard to pick up on, but the direction of the kind of diagonal direction of the two stuff go in opposite directions. Very subtle.
Yeah,
very nice.
I think it'll be very noticeable.
Yeah.
What you just said. Yeah. When you go around it, it'll be very different. Yeah. I think that's a clever solution to. Do you think that I love that it's so restrained versus the tree house. I think that's some thought I need for that, because I think the tendency is to want it to be, very, boisterous. And
that was one of the first things we thought about.
Yeah.
Like, I would think
I want to do that effectively, so I really think it's going to be quite beautiful. I would say that there's a lot of precast, and I like the accent of the metal. One thing that you may want to think about is the tracing of the window opening of the frame, and whether how visible that is, because a couple of your renderings, it almost disappears, which I think would be unfortunate, because the unfortunate thing about precast when it gets wet, it is going to be very dark for the moment. So the ability to trace the openings with a very vibrant color stands out, I think would be very beneficial. It has this really interesting type of upholstery quality, the way you've done a two-story that's been staggered, which I think is very clever too. I'm very interested to see, how that reads as far as the depth. I think the idea that the openings themselves, that the precast is returned and the metal frame is set, but to be able to really read that very special kind of optics. The two-story reading of the base and the transparency coming down the pipe. Just thinking about it, night in the winter, having that glow. I think that's it. I think the precast is a really, elegant material.
Excuse me, it's very difficult to hear this part of the conversation for those of us online.
Okay.
Yeah, this one should.
Apologies for that. Anything, did you hear some of the comments, none of the comments? Would you like David to summarize that one more time?
No, I just was saying that the precast, I think the way it's being depicted is very beautiful. I really appreciate the understated kind of elegant backdrop to the treehouse and not wanting to compete with it. I do think that there's something very important about the window opening and the way the frame is going to read, so that when, the building does get wet and it where the window opening happens. The two-story base, I think, is very successful in the transparency and the idea that during the wintertime, it'll be, really glow. I think the scale of it, I think, is really, quite elegant. There's a very interesting height to width ratio between the treehouse and this building, your pipe building, in relationship to the growth in the glade. So I think that's where, a lot of the comments will come. The success of how that is.
Okay, thank you.
Anne Marie, would you like to follow? I see your hand up.
Sure, and I apologize again, not having the opportunity to see the model. I think I'm very excited about the evolution of the facade and the textures. My colleagues have commented. I am struggling a little bit to understand how it translates to really the perimeter of the building. It's very clear in a view like this what happens. I have a little bit of trouble understanding what happens on the face of the building that faces the pike. I know from reviewing the recording from the previous meeting, there is some conversation, I think, from Commissioner Manfredi about just what happens, is there a differentiation between what happens with a residential room versus a dorm room versus a community space. I'm excited to see the evolution of a little bit more of a kind of a base, middle, and top. And I also appreciate the reference to the Wentworth CEIS building being kind of being a precedent. I think what's interesting about that building is there is some variation in terms of how the building responds to different conditions on the site. And I would just encourage you, as you continue to develop this design, to think about ways you might modulate it without losing, several of my colleagues commented, there's a beauty in the simplicity of the building, but I do think there's an opportunity for some subtle modulation that both responds to differences in conditions that it faces, as well as provides a little bit of play, again, not in a colorful way, but something that loosens the restraint a little bit. I was looking at, I think Simmons Hall at MIT, and just sort of looking at some other examples, thinking about how does one create a little bit of diversity. And also, you've mentioned in your presentation, this presentation and others, the role of craft, the idea, my colleagues have talked about, the desire for more warmth, the Wentworth goldenrod color, and I think just really pushing a little bit more this idea of the integration of craft and interweaving into this design, because I like the direction it's taking. It feels there's a strong identity emerging, and also the idea of how do you think about this being the anchor for a new part of campus, and thinking about how you, in a holistic way, express this identity in the building and the landscape, and not think of them as separate objects. I think there's still an opportunity to push this a little bit more and create something that really brings a sense of harmony to this space, which has a lot of different tensions to it. Thank you.
There is a paving pattern that looks somewhat like this.
Oh, yeah.
The shelf system. Oh, I've forgotten who makes it.
Oh, I think that's, you mean like the facade?
It's like the facade, I'm thinking at least the plinths that come out might have some edging or something. We don't want to go crazy, but I always worry a little. Go ahead, Anne Marie, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just was going back to a comment from previous meetings about the idea of richness and texture, that I feel like this design, there's sometimes, and maybe it's the way the renderings are rendered, it looks a little corporate to me, and I keep looking for kind of where's that richness that really helps to give this a strong sense of identity, and that idea of how can you begin to again, marry what's happening in the building in the landscape. And I love the idea of almost like a charm bracelet of garden spaces, that all of a sudden that evoke some images for me that become very evocative and help to offset my fear of these being dark, cold spaces, no matter how exquisitely you render the base. You know, what draws people into these spaces and what makes this uniquely Wentworth?
Thanks to Anne-Marie. David Manfredi?
Yeah, two thoughts. I've been turning over in my mind Jonathan's comments about whether the two towers are so similar that it creates a from a certain view angle, maybe even this one, if I was a pedestrian, a very long facade that merges. But I also agree with David Hassin how I think it's a beautiful building, and I keep wondering what the very simple move is that creates a little bit more separation. And I do appreciate the change in the diagonal texture. Wonder how the sun will make that even more effective. That's one thought. Second is I think the short ends of these two pieces, these two elements are they're wonderful in their thinness and their elongation. And I don't know that you've made enough of that yet. Someone made the point that there's this obvious core. I just wonder if it's there's just another opportunity there. There could be, maybe it just wants to be very simple in contrast to the highly articulated, regular but very highly articulated texture of the long facades. That somehow it gets, especially on the one that's closest to it, well, the one that's sort of the north end of the west building, I guess is right. Just maybe there's too much detail and it not enough contrast with the highly articulated long facade. Overall, I think I agree with David Nagahiro. It's I think it will be a beautiful building.
Thanks, David. Any other commissioner comments?
There's a couple more things that I failed to mention. You may have some tricks up your sleeves. I know that in the past I've struggled with getting precast and passive house to play nice in the same type of water. So I just put that out there. That can be quite difficult with all the bridging, but that would be my only concern. But I love the idea of precast. I just hope it can hold on to through all those. And then secondly, there was a comment that I think Anne-Marie was making about the entry door to the side, and we were looking at the plan. And it struck me that you have, if you look at go to a landscape site plan, you got this really unique opportunity, which I don't see much in the city, where you have the open spaces, or let's go to one where you actually show the grove too. Yeah, I think. But you have the glade, the grove, and then I would also call that front piece along the pike as an additional civic open space. And so I think continuing to encourage you to think about where it says dining and entry and commons as an additional, what could feel like indoor-outdoor space. And I think that could come down to the material, perhaps some of the pavers that's outside make their way inside, but making that thin glass veil feel as fragile as possible to really make that, because I think you have a beautiful opportunity to see right through, and you can show it in the model. And to David's point about at night how the building will glow and you sort of see all the way through, I think that could do a lot for bringing like the Avenue of the Arts into the thing and just making your ground floor landing feel as porous and, you know, transparent visually. And I know you have some security concerns, but what can you do to make that feel porous? And then I think just two more things. Is the rooftop podium available for any sort of landscape, even if it's a visual amenity for folks looking down, or will that be sort of a white?
We can know that's PV ready.
Oh, that will have panels on it? Okay. And lastly, I just think with towers, I think more neighborhood views. You started to show at the very end of the deck, I think one or two views, but back to the point about how long the facade is and the degree of change, I think people will see this building with like glimpses of vignettes, like they'll see it through the view cones of other buildings. So if you can like step around here and shoot views and step around here and shoot views, just study how long this thing is and where are the blue sky moments and where are they not, to help gauge that.
I feel like you guys got a more comprehensive review today because of the model, and I feel a little unfair that we dug more deeply because you gave us more information.
No, it's great.
It was so helpful. The beginning of your presentation said something about reserved boldness. What was the terminology, right? I think you have achieved
I should remember
that.
that.
I didn't know what you meant when you said it at first.
Purposeful boldness, or purposefully
Yeah,
bold.
I do see that this has a kind of, it's strong, but it's not loud. There's a lot to really like about it.
All right, well, it looks like that may conclude comments. So we have a motion. We can consider two separate votes, or a motion to approve the IMP amendment and 550 Huntington, and I will leave it up to the commissioners to offer a motion. Ooh, we have a
I'm
silent
going
group.
to suggest that we take them as two separate votes without prejudicing the
Okay.
outcome in any way. So I will move approval for the IMP.
Have a second. All right, so let me call on all of the commissioners. Linda Eastley,
Yes.
Jonathan Garland,
Yes.
Shauna Phyllis-Smith,
Yes.
Nick-Yan Kim? Yes. Kathy Kotorides? Yes. Anne-Marie Lubenow?
Yes.
David Manfredi?
Yes.
Catherine Morris?
Yes.
David Nagahiro? Yes. Laura Solano?
Yes.
Kirk Sykes?
Yes.
Myself, Mimi Love, yes. So, congratulations, the IMP is recommended to move forward as presented. So now we need a second motion for building.
Can you go through the guidelines? Has this also gone through the four? This has also gone through the four. Okay.
And so the distinction could be with provisos, if there are such, comments, or we could just have a straight motion
And
or to recommend.
yeah, and just to remind commissioners, as we're moving towards a model of recommendations, right, as staff continue to work with proponents on all projects, we very much take into account everything that was said during the meetings, and work with proponents to effectuate those as the design develops. So certainly I don't know that we need to repeat call out everything, all the good comments that were said. We now record these meetings, so the recordings are available moving forward. If there are one or two issues I think that the commissioners want to call attention to, it would make sense to call those out as special moments for further development.
Good stuff.
I'd make a motion to approve with the proviso that the team continue to work with staff with a particular focus on the open space issues as we've discussed today. This part isn't part of the motion, but I think we talked a lot about the glade. We didn't talk anything about the grove. I think that in the development of the grove, it should also have the same attitude of something exceptional in there. I think just the lawn, and I'm assuming it's also DG, it isn't living up to all of the potential. But anyway, my motion still stands with the, that my motion to approve with the proviso that the staff continues to work, that the proponent continues to work with staff with a particular focus on the open space issues that we've discussed today.
All right, we have a second. There was two motions that came out at the exact same time. One was to approve without provisos, and one was Shauna's motion. So I'm going to turn over to David.
I think Shauna's correct.
Okay, all right. So we're going to continue with the motion to approve or recommend to move forward with a particular focus on the open space. And I'm going to call on everyone. So Linda Eastley?
Yes.
Jonathan Garland?
Yes.
Shauna Gill-Smith?
Yes.
Young Kim? Yes. Kathy Kodaridis?
Yes.
Anne Marie Lubenow?
Gonna abstain.
David Manfredi?
Yes.
Catherine Morris?
Yes.
David Nagahiro?
Yes.
Laura Solano?
Yes.
Kurt Sykes?
Yes.
Myself, Mimi Love. Yes. Right. Well, recommendation to move forward with the design with those particular focuses on open space, and I think the other comments that were shared by the commissioners. Congratulations.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you. And a round of applause for the model.
Oh,
Though we finished our project review, we do want to move into a few announcements. People, commissioners particularly, could stay. Others are welcome to if you'd like.
And we have sandwiches, so if anybody is looking for a meal, we have some extra food here. Please,
So, and while everyone's resettling, I'll just note that we're going to get 2025 year in review from Christina. Oh, thank you. That would be awesome.
I'm good. Thanks.
Could you bring this up here?
Brought it through the turnstile and security checkpoint. Fed it right through the tray.
It didn't fit.
They probably killed
They
it.
have probably had to scan it.
Yeah, I was looking for like sections, like did they bring it in sections? Not alone, all one. Oh, of course.
Oh, okay.
Nice job.
Very nice job.
Yeah, very nice. Good precedent for, set the bar pretty high for other projects.
Yeah.
Mimi,
Yes.
I had a question. For those of us who are joining remotely, I can no longer see the room. Maybe that's just me.
I think as we're doing a little bit of a break, but we will make sure that. Yeah. Lizzie is
Okay.
getting it back.
Great. It's been down for a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure you guys are back up.
Sorry, Samantha,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Good night.
Very serious.
All right. That is a giant cookie. That's a whole meal.
It could hurt someone. Yep. All right, I think we're all here, and so I'm going to pass it on to Christina.
Okay, thank you, Mimi. So this is a brief, very brief year in review, 7:30, and I like to keep it to the point to begin with anyways, so this suits me. I'm pleased to report that 2025 was another very productive year for the Commission. Over the course of 25 meetings, we reviewed 21 plans and projects and issued final recommendations on 15 of them. And Seth said that that felt light, and I would be inclined to agree. So I'm going to double check the math, but I would say that even if it's fewer than projects in prior years, it didn't feel that way. The workload included several exceptionally large and complex efforts. These ranged from institutional master plans for Harvard and Northeastern universities, the IMP Amendment that you saw here this evening, to major redevelopment plans for Gillette manufacturing site and the Austin Street parking lots, as well as some very, very large projects, which is not a formal Article 80 designation, but I think that it should be, such as the Phase 2 of the Edison Power Plant redevelopment and the entire area between West First Street and Pappas Way, informally known as the Research Channel. Collectively, well over 100 acres in terms of land area and certainly outsized impact on the growth of the city. Beyond these numbers, some of the Commission's most important work this year focused on reforms to our procedures and operations. In coordination with complementary changes led by the Planning Department, these reforms were aimed at delivering a more predictable and streamlined review process for proponents while maintaining the rigor and quality of the Commission's work. We, of course, thank the Commissioners for your patience, insight, and perspective throughout the effort, which is, of course, ongoing, but we believe is already bearing fruit. And finally, just a quick note, as we look ahead to 2026, we anticipate a slower pace of activity due to broader economic conditions. We intend to use this time productively to continue refining our processes, ensuring the Commission is well positioned to support higher volumes as the market recovers, while providing the clear, consistent, and timely review in the meantime. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Diana.
Thank you so much, Christina. This was an incredible year for us, and I think an important accomplishment to add to our inventory in 2025. This year, we also welcomed 2 new commissioners. We welcomed Jonathan Garland and David Nagahiro, who have really jumped in and wholeheartedly enjoyed commenting, contributing to the broader fabric of our city, and really bringing a unique perspective to how we think about city building. And we really thank you for being part of our BCDC family. It is also with much sadness that I'm also here to announce the departure of our Commissioner Kim.
Let's call it graduation.
Graduation. You're part of the alumni society now. A very distinguished set of alumni who joined back in 2018 as part of the cohort that included Eric Keller and Anne Marie. Over your 8 years of service, you have offered unique perspectives on projects, really thoughtful conviction, which really sharpened our discussions and strengthened our outcomes. And, as a fellow landscape architect and, huge fan of your work, I really want to offer my appreciation for your advocacy, specifically in the identity of the public realm, for the whimsy, the joy, and the genuine expression of place that you always bring to every single site plan that comes before you. So your contributions have certainly left a mark on our city and this commission, and we have deeply appreciated your service. I also, I'm keeping my comments brief because I know many of my colleagues here and the commissioners may want to express some words, but it has been such a pleasure to work with you. And I think
You're going to be sorely missed.
Oh,
But you'll be part of this very, very illustrious alumni association that is the BCDC.
I do appreciate that. I want to thank you, Diana, for making this so seamless and generous in this process. And then, of course, Beth and Christina for everything you did. You guys were like the glue. I can always call you or
And Lizzie.
Lizzie. But a number of you have reached out to me, and I appreciate saying, and you've always answered your emails the same way, which is, now you'll get your Tuesday nights back. And I just, I've been thinking a lot about what we do, and it's been a privilege to be a part of this family. And I was thinking, like, on certain Tuesday nights, with certain projects, it's been a little magical. Like, we become sort of this single organism when we are commenting together, and it reminds me a little of jazz. I was trained as a pianist, and playing jazz with good friends was the closest I could think of this community that I was a part of. So I'm so grateful. So my response to all of you is that I believe that there's nothing that I will do on a Tuesday night looking forward that will be as important as what I've done over the last 8 years with all of you. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please don't hesitate to come back as part of the public. You can always come to the
Well, once with the commissioner, always the commissioner, and there are other city appointments that we may,
Come sign on during the meeting. David Carlson, we get some visitors.
We do have an alumni member, David Carlson is still on.
But he's still on,
Yeah.
right. But David Carlson wasn't quite
Well,
commissioner.
No, he was
Yeah,
director.
so.
I mean, I think we want to welcome commissioners to, have a comment if they want to, but I'll start, because tonight was awesome.
It was the best.
I know, and your feedback was critical
Wow,
to
it
the
was
conversation,
such a
so
nice,
I'm feeling already
relaxing-
like regret.
Me too. I was like, when they brought the mom in, I was like, oh, I forgot about this. But I think it's, yeah, we don't need to go around. I don't need that, so.
No, but I definitely want to, just say it was great, I wasn't with you for the 8 years, obviously, just a shorter time, but I feel like I got to know you.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're still going to continue to see your work in the city. Your practice is growing, and your contributions will come on the other side of this commission, and it'll just be great to stay in touch and
definitely
be part of that really prestigious alumni group. I feel like that propelled you to a whole other category.
Nick Young, I thought you were so thoughtful this evening, and I actually did have that thought that Mimi said, maybe she's regretting this now. And so as soon as somebody announces it, she'll say, just kidding. But it's
David, you and I have occasionally, we've been in Houston or something, and you said, wasn't last night amazing? Like, David Haseen said something, and then you said something, and I said something, and so those are the moments. Like, there are no rule books. That's what I learned when I started here, because so I will miss this, but I think it's always good to turn things up a little bit, right?
Well, I'll say this from, we're gonna add.
No, go ahead, John. Go ahead, John. No, I'm done.
I'll just say from just beginning to work with you in this way, but honestly, when I was invited to join, first thing I did was I looked at the cast of members, and I was just thrilled to not hear your comments, but learn from what you put forth, because it really is eye-opening. I'm not just saying that.
Well, it took me 3 months to actually speak at BCDC, so the two of you just jumped right in. I was so impressed.
Well, one thing I learned about you, which I think we as a group should continue to do in your stead is you have a certain boldness that it's a polite boldness, but
Is it polite or
it is
just
it's
bold?
a boldness where, like, I remember we were debating about like the raise the hand function, and Nick Young was like, "We should just talk." Like, totally talk.
That's how jazz is played,
But I'm like,
right?
he's right. Like, you're right.
But
So
you
like,
can't do that if you're not in person.
right,
That's
and
what I
like,
like.
and like the way you kind of almost broke the model but didn't break the model. I think we should carry that forward because that's how you get, that's how you, what I call squeeze the orange and you maximize the design quality, is you get in it and it's a little messy, but I think you bring that.
Yeah.
And I just hope we
I
don't.
call that
do
Asian
that.
style.
I could tease you and raise my hand, Mick Young, right now to make my comment if you wanted. One
I
of
was
the
going to
things.
bring up Rice University tonight, Linda, because I know
Oh,
you found
thank
us there.
you.
And how
Thank
much
you.
DG they have on campus there, and it's everywhere. It's like everywhere. Anyway.
It is. I think the most terrifying thing that I'm realizing is that we can see ourselves reflected in the glass, the other direction. I was actually so happy, David, when you made your comment, because then you were up full screen. But Mick Young, I wanted to make one comment. I know we'll have more time at the commissioner breakfast, but one thing that I've loved about you and being in these meetings with you, you have a little bit of Andrea Lears in you. And by that, I mean...
That is the biggest compliment. I appreciate that.
What I mean is that I can kind of tell when you're really getting a little bit wound up about really lowering the boom. And you give a lot of compliments and, you know, tell the proponent they have had a great... But then just as Jonathan said, you know, you have a calm persuasiveness about you. And I think that the commissioners love it, but I think the proponents really respond to that. And, you know, you often are quoted when they come back, and that they've taken what you've said and they've thought about it and they've made changes based on it. And I think that's such a great legacy that you've left. And it's so you, it's part of your personality and it's part of your design style and it's part of your communication. And I'm really going to miss that. So thank you so much.
You're going to make me cry. Don't do it. I think
we're going to save that for the annual breakfast.
We're going to do it.
We're going to have a proper celebration at the breakfast.
No, this is perfect. I just want to thank all of you. I know it's getting late, and it's been such a pleasure to be part of this and a privilege. So thank you so much. And I see all of you in different contexts, and so I don't see this as a sad moment, just a transition moment. So
thank you.
All right, everybody, go eat dinner.
We have one more announcement. So just as a reminder, we do our annual appreciation for your service. We're working with staff right now to coordinate that. Lizzie is helping us out with getting that event scheduled, but we're hoping for some time in February. So be on the lookout for our emails with dates very soon, and that'll be a moment where we can also properly send you off, Commissioner.
This is perfect. So,
but I also want to also say goodbye to another very important member of our BCDC family, which is Christina Rico. Christina joined as the Commission's Executive Director back in 2024, taking up the reins from Elizabeth Seifel. And Christina, just as she does with all of the amazing things she touches, started listing, inventorying, taking notes, identifying, scheduling, and basically any other thing that you could, any task you could imagine to make the BCDC more efficient and organized. Christina really took on. She helped us formalize many aspects of how the Commission operates today. Also played a very critical role that I think a lot of you don't know around Article 80, actually drafting the Article 80 zoning changes that we adopted this summer. And
and also really taking a look at how that operates with the DCDC and there being really a symbiotic relationship between those two things. And she did all of this with countless other background tasks, making sure that we could coordinate with your schedules, make sure that you had access to the technology you needed to participate in your fullest forms as part of this commission. And it doesn't go unseen, and it's something that we simply think she's made us better for all of the work that Christina has put into making our commission what it is. Thankfully for us, Christina's not leaving the planning department. She was promoted back in July to be our Assistant Deputy Director of Design. So as you know, we have two divisions within the urban design team, a design review team that is led by Seth, and a design team that is led by Mira. And Christina is joining Mira as Assistant Deputy Director of Design to ensure we continue to elevate design excellence across all of our planning initiatives citywide. In her stead, we have Seth Reisman, who is going to continue as our Deputy Director of Design Review and also step into the role of Executive Director for the Commission. We see this as a natural transition of the already outsized role that Seth plays in facilitating conversation with the Commission. And also, you know, we will be working to identify staff to continue to support the Commission. So there will be some updates on staffing and new appointments very soon that will help us put us in the best position to continue to run the Commission. So I just want to thank Seth for stepping up in this way and thank him for his leadership, and also thank Christina, who just has made this commission so much better. And we're so thankful for your organization, your wit, and on display that just like brightens up any kind of situation around organization.
And we were hoping when Diana announced this, you'd hear it like the comment before to say, I'm just kidding, I'm just saying.
I've also thought about my Tuesday nights. Oh, but there was so much, but all the Tuesday things.
But with that,
You and I should go.
Pour one out.
come on, guys, that's not fair.
That's not fair.
Anyhow, thank you both. I'm very excited to welcome Seth as our new executive director, and we'll be before you with more updates on staffing very soon. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Mimi and Lisa, to close us out. Again, I think we can leave it for the.
I just want to say one thing. Christina, if you're ever looking for a job, ...
Right? All right, Laura.
We have the power to mute you, Laura.
I would say too, Christina, you know, I don't know any better because.
Oh, you don't know any better.
So, Christina made onboarding so easy.
Yeah,
There's so
don't
much
even
information,
know.
and she was just so clear, and she came into the office with her daughter.
Oh my God.
It was like, there was so much information to, you know, download, and she made it very easy, and it was I'm very grateful for that. And I love when she gives people a 2-minute warning on the.
So very clear.
Yeah.
Very clear.
I appreciate that stepping in, because I think there's this kind of great connection. So thank you both.
I know Steph is going to do a great job, but I'm sort of glad that tonight's my last meeting.
Oh my goodness.
Kidding.
It was just, I mean, Christina is the most prolific data collector and communicator.
Yeah.
Like, those two skills are kind of an amazing combination that
worry about you, Seth. Everything is full. So let's not keep him without staff.
We're gonna have staffing him. We're gonna have staffing it out soon.
I spent 5 years working for Mimi, so she knows.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Small town.
Yeah, I think Mimi and I have a really, we have a unique position because we met with Christina. I think it was at least 5 or 6 times a week, right, Christina? Over the past couple of years, but a lot. And what I really admire about you, Christina, is yes, you have an amazing ability to take a lot of information and distill it so that we aren't reading through mounds and mounds of data, and it became so readily accessible. I don't know if any of you remember what things looked like before Christina stepped into that role, but we did not have we probably had 1/10 of the information going into meetings that we do now. So I agree, Seth, you are in trouble that way, but it was lovely. It was lovely to have that background and be able to feel more prepared for meetings. The second thing I'll share is about you, Christina, is that sometimes, you know, the public comment always impressed me. I always felt like you knew everyone that was making a public comment. You had this calmness about you when you were taking public comment, even if the public comment wasn't necessarily on point, and especially if it was spirited, and just made everyone feel welcome for sharing their voice, which is such an important part of our public process. But I remember asking you one time, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize you knew so-and-so. And you're like, I don't. But they just felt really, they felt really comfortable, and you were very gracious about thanking all of our public for attending and making comments. And again, I really appreciate that about you. We're going to miss you.
Well, I'm gonna miss the commission, and I guess I wasn't really going to say something, but would just say that I'm paid to do this job. This is my actual job, and so inspired by all of you who do this job, you know, as volunteers. It makes the work that I put into it, that Seth puts into it, Diana, Lizzie, feel very easy, because I want to support what you all are doing. Is very important and irreplaceable. I think at one point we tried to, maybe from my data sort of perspective, when we were saying goodbye to Bill, tallied up, right, all that Bill had independently given, but, you know, sort of yearly when we think about all 13 of you doing this on a volunteer basis, with the frequency you do it, the length that you do it, it's very inspiring. It makes it very easy to spend my time doing this. So I'll miss it. And I'm very grateful to Diana for the opportunity, because it was a big one. It was a big swing. And I think, yes.
Christina's a rock star, and she's rising. She's rising through the ranks of the urban design department. So we're very excited to have her continue to lead in that space. So
You're not leaving us. You're
No. Graduating.
Well,
You're gonna be great.
can I,
no pressure.
Now I have something.
yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I think Mick Young and Christina, you're both emblematic of, you know, how the bar has been rose, how it has rose or how it has risen, at least in my last quarter century sitting in that seat. So we're sorry to lose you, but I think you've left us in a great place, and I think it's reflected in the whole staff, Seth and Diana, but also in all the other fellow commissioners. This is a hard act to follow for anybody who sits in one of these seats.
That's so sweet.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Not sweet, true.
It's true.
Anyways, this is a little too much. All right, let's
Well,
call it a
with
night.
that-
Thank you so much to everybody. I'm sure I will see all of you very soon. Oh, we are?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we have to officially adjourn.
Okay.
So do I have a
All
motion?
right. Take care.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All righty, I'm calling on all the commissioners. Linda
Yes.
Eastley, Jonathan Garland.
Yes.
I think we have Shauna. We saw your
Yes.
Mickey on the last adjournment. Kathy Cuderitas?
Yes, Shauna did say yes.
Yeah. All right, we heard you. You're on mute for a second. Anne Marie Louvenel?
Yes, thank you, Mick Young.
Thank you. David Manfredi?
Yes.
We had Catherine leave, David Nagahiro, Laura Solano.
Yes, and it's hard to
Kirkside.
lose 2 stars.
I know. Well, it doesn't seem like a great start to 2020. We really have to turn this around.
You know,
Trend
Laura, David, Anne Marie, we worked very hard to make you so jealous that you weren't here today by showing off the
You were.
model.
Job well
we
done.
helped Diana and Seth. Like, anyway, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
We are adjourned.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.